have liftoff. We're going to sit here for a minute or two and let people slowly trickle in. We've already got 50 people who are in the waiting room, so lovely turnout. If you were here last time, hey Aunt, yeah, please just drop a hello into the chat if you'd like. Say where you're coming in from, because it's always interesting to see the different countries and regions. And if you can name your company, obviously feel free to do that, but no pressure. And we kick off normally like 3 minutes in, but I keep an eye on the number of people, and if it keeps ticking up, I wait. So hopefully people aren't going to like trickle in over a 10-minute period, because I don't want to keep anyone waiting. Düsseldorf, amazing. Guten Tag, Arndt. Wie geht's? Freeport, Maine. Good to see you, Jonathan. Sorry about the loss to Belgium the other day.
Controversial topic.
Last time I mentioned it, I promise. Good day, Ben. From Australia, currently working from London. I'm based in Bedfordshire right now, but I'm normally in Berlin, traveling a lot. Good evening, Mahmoud, coming in from the UAE. Toyan from Singapore. Just ticking over 100 people now. Stefan, great to see you. Big hello from London. Good day, Declan. All right, amazing. What a range. Pauline from France. We're in Bedfordshire. I'll likely be down the road in St. Neots, Bedford. Without doxing myself too much. Okay. Hello from Miami. Hello, Vanessa. All right, I'm excited for this because we had a really amazing number of signups, and we seem to have a pretty excellent turnout. We had 500 people register, and we've got me, Jake. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of Flank here today, along with my VP of product, the product leader of our organization, Paul Lacey, and I'll be handing you over to him after giving a kind of 3 to 5 minute intro on what Flank is, what we're doing here, and what we're going to be looking at today, and everything else. And I'll drop our Substack a couple of times as we go, because if you're interested in this, it will be useful for you to read at least some of the articles we write on Substack. They're not about Flank. They're usually about our perspective on the legal market, the research we're doing, what we see from third-party tools. Very opinionated, often wrong, but you get an opinion. So we also, on a Friday, every week without fail, release a weekly AI update. It's got information about legal AI, but also general AI themes. So if you want to know when Fable is going to be back online, like it was earlier in the week, last week, that's where you can find that kind of thing. And without further ado, it's been a few minutes. We've got a great turnout. It's leveling off now. So I'm going to give a bit of an intro, bit of an overview of what we're doing here today. Thank you first for being here today, giving us an hour of your time on a Wednesday. If you're in the UK, it's very, very hot. So hopefully you can hydrate. I think if you're anywhere in Europe, it's probably very, very hot. We've got people from all corners of the world, it seems, from looking at the chat. As I said, as we came in, I'm Jake. I'm one of the co-founders of Flank. I'll give just a very quick overview on who we are, because it does inform everything you're going to be hearing today from Paul, everything you're going to be seeing today from Paul. So Flank is an agentic legal service. So it's not another app. It's not software. So the way that enterprise legal teams work with Flank is that they hand entire categories of work to our headless agents. And the outcome of that is that requests keep arriving exactly as they are currently from the business. So via email, via MS Teams, wherever. Agents will pick those requests up. They then do the work end to end, and your lawyers supervise instead of doing the work if required. Sometimes you're happy with the category of work not being supervised, and that's all good. We've been building agents for a lot longer than it's been fashionable. And this session is essentially us primarily Paul, opening up on how we actually do it, both on Flank, so our own platform, but also on third-party tools like Claude Cowork. Everything we show you today is how we actually work and operate at Flank and how our clients actually work and operate when we work with them. For example, either using Flank or through some of our workshops where we work with them on implementing something like Claude Cowork. So nothing you see here today is smoke and mirrors. I believe Paul is going to show you really the guts of our setup, to the extent that he pointed out earlier in the setup that one of our scheduled updating folders in our brain that we use had not been updated since March. So it's going to be warts and all. You'll see the real deal. A little bit of housekeeping quickly so that you can relax, know that we're recording. And this recording plus a write-up and the deck and all the other materials will be shared with you. And there's a space that we create, insights.flank.ai/webinars, that has all the historical webinars with all the data and everything else from that. That should be in the chat as well, being posted by Blair. A quick overview of what this is and why we're running it. Around 500 people registered for this, and we've got a good chunk of you have attended already. You're here today. It's overwhelmingly leaders from in-house teams and legal ops. And I think I know why it's so popular, because if your team is like most of the teams that we're speaking to, you're already using AI to some extent. There's licenses, there's seats, there's co-pilots, be it MS Copilot or some other kind of Copilot assistive technology. And there's a handful of people in your organization, maybe in your team, maybe not, doing pretty impressive things with the existing AI that you've got. But what is much, much harder to answer is the question that your CFO or your board or your GC will eventually ask, or is already asking, which is, what has that technology and AI usage actually changed for the team? So in terms of the volume of work that you're shipping, the speed you're shipping it at, the cost of shipping it, the throughput of the system as a whole and how it supports the business. How has that changed? And that's the critical point. And that gap between individuals getting better at their jobs and the legal function, your legal function actually working differently, is what today's about. I'm not going to answer it now. That's Paul's job, but I'd invite you just to hold that question at the top of your mind for the next hour, because everything that Paul's going to show you is aimed at answering that gap. So across Cowork, across Flank, and any other tool you might be using in the org. And for the hour ahead, it'll be a bit less than that. What we're going to cover is, in part one, fully practical and tool agnostic. So Paul's going to build / show what the build is live, the foundation that we think every legal team needs before agents can really do work for them. So essentially showing some of our setup, how you have consistent shared context through a whole team, and how you use AI to work as a team, not just as individual lawyers. And he'll show you how to keep it always up to date and always learning, rather than letting it rot like most knowledge bases do. As we know, if you have a CLM, you probably know that eventually degrades and you need to do something about it. So Paul will show you real configuration on screen, built in real time in front of you on Claude Cowork. And that's going to be very, very soon. So I won't keep you waiting too much longer. But whatever tools you're using in your org, it should be transferable to that. So if you've got MS Copilot, if you've got Agent Studio, Agentforce, Scout, there's a whole range of different tools that you probably have some kind of access to, either on your own in your personal time or at work. And it should all be transferable. At least the principles will be transferable. So you can pick that up and you can copy it right after this call or tomorrow. And everything that we share with you should help that. If you need any other material from us, obviously you can shout. So that's an absolute promise that you will leave part one being able to implement something in your third-party AI tool. Part two, we go domain specific directly into legal, because there's certain kinds of work, routine, high volume stuff, that is kind of quasi-legal, relatively low risk, that the stuff you probably currently push to an ALSP or to an offshore delivery center, where making your people faster isn't really the answer. You just want that work off your team's plate. And Paul will show you how we currently do that with Flank and how we support our clients with doing that. Finally, we're going to sit down with our alignment lead, Lorna Kemmeraz, an experienced commercial counsel herself, and she also spends her days inside real customer implementations and deployments. She's supervising, she's setting them up, she's speaking to these clients who are more or less successful every single day. And they'll be together, Lorna and Paul, addressing one of the central questions you're going to have with any kind of build project, which is, how do I do this with trust? How do I build trust in the organization? And then also, what does supervision and review really look like? Who's accountable, and how do we ensure that whoever is accountable is confident in taking accountability? So what do they need to be able to do that? All of this will be honest answers from real lived experience. There's not going to be any smoke and mirrors, no magic claims. And then it's over to 10 to 15 minutes of your questions. So back to Paul, your guide for the next 20 to 30 minutes. He's our VP product, as I said on introing. So he is our product leader in the organization. He builds our product roadmap. He works with me and our CTO on that. So two things you should know about him is that he's a builder. He gets hands-on. He rolls his sleeves up, really prototyping all the time. And he also uses these tools every single day. Everything he shows you is stuff he's built, that he oversees, and that he gets benefit from. So nothing that you're about to see is a canned demo or fake in any way. It's literally how we run our company. If you like what you see today, please follow our Substack. I said I'd rep it a couple of times. Maybe the link will go back in the chat again. I don't know how far down it's gone. And otherwise, without further ado, Paul, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Jake. And yeah, really, really good to be here and to see how many people are joined. It's amazing, and from lots of different corners of the earth as well. So I'm typically based in the UK, but today I'm in the south of France. I saw there was a couple joining from France, so hello to you. Yeah, so everything I'm going to show you now is real, what we use. I'm going to start with Cowork and how we use Cowork internally. And how we link that to this concept of a shared brain, and then I'll jump into Flank itself and into that more sort of those vertical domain specific agents that Jake mentioned. So yeah, Cowork as an organization, we've been using Cowork and the whole Anthropic suite for a while, and we use it very, very heavily. Essentially, everyone on the team uses it. I'd say hourly. Daily would be underplaying it. If you then consider how much our engineering team uses it, it's enormous. What we found early on, like a lot of other teams, was that especially for sort of outward facing functions, if you've got a lot of people running things in Claude, creating content, messaging through Claude, all this kind of stuff, then it's really easy for chaos to ensue, and people to run off and do their own thing, and then to be divergence. We hear this a lot with customers where it's almost like AI overload now, and people are using loads of different tools, and they're going off in different directions, and it's really, really hard to control. So what we built was this marketing brain, and I'm going to show you the real thing that we use to try and essentially bring some order to that and help people who were facing out of the organization, i.e. to our customers, to partners, to prospects, to the market, and help really create a coherent way we talk about Flank. And it's been honestly game changing for our ability to communicate coherently with a kind of singular message, whether that's outside or even internally. We even use this inside. If I want to speak to the team, I'll sometimes check my own phrasing with it to make sure that I'm not creating ambiguity or confusion in the way I'm saying things. So it's been brilliant. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up Cowork. I'm going to create quite a basic tool that leverages the brain, and I'll use that as an opportunity to talk you through the elements of Cowork and then the marketing brain itself. So just give me 1 second. Let me get it up. So as I said, well, as Jake mentioned a moment ago, sorry, I'm just having an issue sharing. Here we go. So as Jake mentioned a moment ago, this is going to be tool agnostic. Cool, you can see that. That's good. This could be any tool. We like the Anthropic suite, but it could actually be any tool. I'm going to create, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a scheduled task that nudges me once a week by DM in Slack to write a LinkedIn post, and then offers to basically check the content and the messaging of it, that it's on brand. This will show you how to set up things in Cowork, but also create your own shared intelligence. So this is Cowork. Most of you have probably seen it before. I'm sure a lot of you use it. I'll start with the real basics. There's 4 essentially like primitives you need to be aware of with Cowork. So there's connectors. These are the things that Cowork connects to, it reads and writes to. Other tools such as knowledge bases. There's skills. These are essentially single prompts that tell Cowork how you'd like a particular task done. There's tasks themselves, which are the actual runs of what you want done that produce the output. And then finally, there's projects. And projects, think of as a bit like workspaces, where you can run multiple tasks and they can all share context and memory. Let me start this off then by creating a project. So let's call this one. Let's call it LinkedIn messaging checker. And you can add a quick description, and you can always update this stuff later and improve it. So help me write great content for LinkedIn, and then we'll create that project. Now, anything that happens will have shared context and memory. There's nothing here yet, but as you start using a project, you'll see it building out more and more stuff. Let me just for a moment get, excuse me, bear with. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a skill. Now, a skill, like I said, is essentially a prompt that tells Cowork how you like particular things done. The easiest way to actually build a skill isn't to write it yourself, but rather is to get Claude to build it for you. So I'm going to get it to build it for me now. So here's the basic prompt I've given it. I want a new skill called brand check. It's going to take a draft LinkedIn post, check it against our marketing brain inbox, and flag anything in the style of the messages off brand. Leave the content for me to judge, and the reply back should be short and direct. Just a quick note, I'm running this on low thinking. So here you can access 3 different models. I'm using 4.8 for this, and I've got effort to low. I wouldn't actually recommend that. I'm only doing that so that we're not waiting ages for things to run in Claude. I would actually recommend you always using higher thinking, especially for more complex stuff. While we're waiting for that, let me just quickly go to customize and connectors. And here you can see everything we're connected to and all the other different tools. There's actually tons that Claude offers. For the sake of this, we just need Box, where our brain is, and Slack, so that it can DM me. Okay, so it's off working. It's now using our marketing brain to begin building out this skill. So why don't I show you what that looks like? Let me just share a different screen with you now. Okay. Hopefully I'm not switching too much, but you can all see that. So that's our marketing brain. Here it is in all of its glory. So it's essentially a single knowledge base for everyone at Flank's Claude to plug into, especially for those people who are market facing. So anyone who might be speaking to customers, prospects, they might want to make a deck to send to a partner, or an email to write to a prospect. They're not quite sure about the messaging, or how to frame a new feature release, or like I said, it could even be internal, but it ensures we start having a single coherent message and we're not diverging. When you look at the volume of content that now gets created with AI, the opportunity for divergence is absolutely enormous. So this kind of brings it all in and ensures quality. It's been game changing for us. And so we've shared this with a few other customers, and they've loved it, which is why we wanted to do this. We use Box. You can use any sort of file storage tool that's out there. We use Box because it was a clean slate for us. We didn't have any other content on there, so there wasn't any risk of customer information or whatever, anything confidential being shared. Total clean slate. We only use it for our brain. We actually have a few other brains as well. Like I also have a product brain, which I use for sort of product design and scoping. But this is the marketing one, I think is actually the coolest one we got. So what I'd really like you to take away from this is there's 3 key layers to it. So ignore for now blog articles and go-to-market ops. They've been added since. When we started, the only thing we had was foundational knowledge, operational knowledge, and real-time knowledge. And think about this as context for AI. And what each of those layers represent is a time horizon for that context. So foundational is like core truths of Flank, things that either never change or change yearly at most, or maybe quarterly, but very, very rarely. Operational knowledge, that stuff, that's about now and what we're doing in the next weeks, maybe up to a quarter. And then real time, this is daily. So this is signals coming in from the market, what our competitors are doing, what we're hearing from customers and prospects. A lot of noise in there, so that gets cleaned out regularly, but it's a constant stream of signals. Let me just open up one for you just to give you a sense of what is actually in here. So each folder is essentially just a bunch of markdown documents. There's nothing too clever or fancy about this. So you can see we've got like competitive landscape, the singular problem we're trying to solve, our positioning, our branding, which this skill is likely going to reference. So let me open up the brand. And you can see straight away, it's a simple markdown plain text document. There's nothing crazy about this. Right at the top of all of these documents, we have instructions for agents. And that's something that's really important here. None of this is really for human consumption. A human can come in and look at it, of course, but we've designed the system for AI agents, for Claude to be able to read. So at the top of every document is this set of instructions. Just going to quickly check in on Claude and make sure it's not waiting for me to do anything. No, all good. So there's a set of instructions that tells it how to use each document. And then if I go out again and go back to the top level, probably the most important singular document in here is this README. So there's a lot of documents in here, and the number of documents grows. So we have this README document, which is essentially the first place, whenever we're using Claude, the first place it goes before it does anything. It looks at this README, and this README tells it how to navigate the marketing brain. It basically lists all the key layers and what's contained in there. And what that means is it doesn't have to check every single document. It can just be really targeted, speeds it up, saves on tokens, all good. Let's go back to Claude. Let me stop sharing that. Okay, I will get faster at this. I'm going to go to Claude. Perfect. Okay. Okay, amazing. Right, it's made the skill. So we've got our skill down here. The skill is just a prompt. So you can see again, it's just a markdown document. I'm going to save it so that that's used. And you can see in the right-hand panel here, it's given me the skill to review. And you can see it's just a basic set of instructions. Here, it actually references the marketing brain. So it's got the brand guidelines in there, the Flank positioning. If anything changes in those documents, if they get updated, this skill stays up to date. So it doesn't go stale. And it's got some basic guardrails. In my experience, Anthropic is excellent at building these on its own. Sometimes for a more complex skill, it'll ask you some questions first to make sure it understands what you really want. But in my experience, it's really very good at these. So that's great. So let's go back. I think it just called it. What did it call it? Here we go. Yeah, brand check. So now I'm just going to run it using a / command. And I've got a pre-made I have a pre-made LinkedIn post to check with it. Here it is. And let's run that and see what it thinks. So it's going to start up. And we should see that it's going to go off. There we go. It's going off to the marketing brain first. Excellent. So while it's doing that, I'm going to flip back to you can see it's grabbing all that box content. I'm going to flip back to Oh no, it don't need to. It's already run. It's been super quick. That's because I got on low thinking. But here you can see it did not like that at all. A bunch of things I did in there wrong. So it gives me the tips on what to do next. This is actually a good example of how we like to use Claude. LinkedIn is a good place where you see a lot of AI slop. And this is the kind of way we want to interact with Claude, right? I don't want Claude to write the LinkedIn post for me. I want it just to give me some tips and feedback because it still needs to be human and authentic. Okay, great. So no, what I don't want to happen is it to rewrite anything. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to schedule a task to run this for me. So we've got a skill. It worked well. Now I want to schedule a task so this runs for me every week. Let me just get my pre-written prompt. So I want to create a scheduled task that runs this every Monday, that sends me a Slack DM nudging me to write a LinkedIn post and then offers to check my work to ensure on brand. And it's going to go off and do that. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to quickly head back to Box just to share one more thing, and then we'll come back to Claude again. So our marketing brain, how do we create it? We didn't write any of this content. We actually got Claude to write all the content for us. So we sat down, we told Claude what we wanted to build. It actually offered a lot of suggestions here and helped us design the layering system and so forth. And then we basically just found all the content we could that was essentially lying around. So what was on our local laptops, computers, what was in G Drive, what we shared out on LinkedIn, our website, everything we could find. And Claude actually created the first versions of these. It would come back to us and we prompted it to, but it raised any gaps with us, any inconsistencies, any ambiguities, anything it wasn't sure as it checked with us. And then we reviewed the final content. We created basically a small version 1 because it's very easy to create content afterwards. But what you want is a small, coherent, solid base. And from there, through Cowork, as you'll see in a minute, you can continue to add to it and expand it. And now it's much bigger than it was, but it started here is like a small version of this. So that then leads me on to the next point, and one of the most important points. AI tools are only as good as the context they're given. And if that context goes stale, they become useless and they stop being used. We see this all the time. I'm sure we all have examples of AI tools we've stopped using, even if it's just something basic you've set up on ChatGPT. But if the context is stale, it doesn't work. So you just saw me create a task. We actually run tasks over this marketing brain to keep it up to date. So to kill any stale information, everything's dated. To ensure anything repetitive or conflicting is surfaced or removed. And so this is always up to date and can always be trusted by the team. And if I go back to Claude again, because it should have finished, I can show you a couple of tasks that I have set up to do this.
Paul, perhaps while you do that, there's been a few comments that have come in regarding the applicability of the marketing brain to legal. And I think it'd be really good to provide a frame of why we're showing this exact context, and also how at Flank we're leveraging this marketing brain. It's a bit of a misnomer, actually. We initially built it for marketing, but how we built this brain, and we now use this brain for tasks far beyond that. So how it's essentially just a shared context. It's like a hive mind for the whole team, which is far more critical, I would argue, in legal than it is in almost any other department, because the consistency of response, the alignment to particular house positions and language, and where what kind of template you might need to use, or formatting styles you might need to use for a particular context, or how you work with a certain customer. For example, on our marketing brain, we have a list obviously of our own clients, and therefore it ensures that anyone new to the team who's like, how do I respond to a message from such and such, they understand this person's an existing client, and otherwise that information is lost. And teams are very often very fragmented and very lossy, especially at enterprise. So as you have churn of people and you have the organization becomes increasingly complex, you actually begin to lose that shared, clear understanding and clear context that you need in order to operate as a team. So Paul, maybe you can provide a quick frame for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it really well there. I think this essentially, this is one example of knowledge work, right? But I think this applies to any knowledge work, and we use this across the company. So this was initially set out as the marketing brain, like Jake said, but it's actually used across functions. We also have other brains. I have a product brain. Exactly the same applies to legal, and I've actually shown this to a few customers who've gone on to set up this exact thing for legal. Like Jake said, it's a hive mind. Any knowledge work can leverage this, especially where you've got a wider team. They're using that in many different ways, doing lots of different jobs, and the context is potentially changing quite rapidly, or is in a complex setting. So either the context is changing fast because market's changing fast, conditions are changing fast, or you're in a complex organization and lots of things are going on. And I think this is a great way of capturing that and keeping on top of it. And in fact, if I go over here, you look under here, I have all my scheduled tasks. I actually have a number of things here that go through this and keep the context up to date. So like I have a weekly brain divergence check, a signal synthesis, all these kind of things, keep it up to date. It kind of doesn't matter that in this case, it's marketing. It could be legal, it could be product. We have a product brain. It could be any knowledge work, I think. Okay. I think we're basically finished with this now. There we go. That scheduled task is now set up. You can see it here. I can even run it. There we go. Let's run it. Perfect. I'll just let that run. But maybe then that's a good point for us to shift back to Flank, because I think you often have to approve things on first time. Cowork's amazing. We use it throughout the company. We use it for marketing, but we use it within legal. We use it within product, within engineering. We use it constantly. And what these brains allow everyone across all those functions to do is have shared context and this hive mind, which is so useful for us where we're working in a market that's moving fast, in a world that's moving fast, where constant new information is coming in. It allows us to stay aligned and to produce and basically produce far higher quality output. Where I think the limit comes in isn't in the capability of something like Cowork. I think Cowork's amazing, but Cowork is ultimately a tool, and a tool can only make a person more capable, faster, better at whatever they're doing. And that's great for some categories of work, but some categories of work you just want off your desk entirely. You either don't want the team dealing with them, it takes up too much time, it's too repetitive, you want them dealing with other stuff. And that's where Flank comes in. And that's what our focus at Flank is. We use agents to deliver outcomes and to automate entire workflows, so that at most a lawyer is checking them rather than doing the work themselves. And just stop sharing that. So yeah, that Cowork's finished now. It sent me a DM. I won't share, I won't bore you all of that, but that's pinged me a little DM telling me to do a LinkedIn post. So you can see how easy it is. But let me go back to Flank. Jake, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in because I'm noticing a number of questions coming in regarding how to maintain the knowledge base, which I think you touched upon, but maybe we just give it maybe another minute.
Okay, yeah.
Just so people understand that. I think, as we said on opening, like one of the biggest issues of conventional knowledge bases like your SharePoint is you start with all the goodwill in the world and you have your shared space for your legal team. And before you know it, it's eroded and you don't know why a particular document exists there or who even put it there. Maybe the last time it was updated was a year ago, if you're lucky. One of the biggest shifts that we've seen with Cowork and how we use Cowork and a marketing brain in this case, our marketing brain, so our shared company brain is maybe a better way to put it, is that we build scheduled tasks for each layer of the brain. So for real time, we're talking about having a scheduled task that's going off once or twice a week, and it's combing critical channels on Slack where we're having certain conversations. It's combing our internal calls, the transcripts. It's also looking at the internet for marketing, particularly relevant market updates. For example, a key fundraising announcement from a competitor, or how one of our clients has released a press release regarding their particular industry vertical. And that's happening every week. Then there's certain things that are changing far less frequently, whether it's monthly or, in the case of a large enterprise, every 6 to 12 months. For example, the personnel, what everyone's role is. Most of this we're going to update manually, but you can also sync it with a system like Personio. And the goal through all of this is, how do we ensure that we have someone in the organization who holds all of the critical context at any given point in time, so that the right decision or the right answer can be given at the right point in time? And that person, we bet, needs to be a system we control that persists year after year, rather than a person who might leave the company and take knowledge with them. So what Paul has shown you is the brain that we have that always persists, and anyone who joins the organization immediately plugs their co-work into that brain. One of the first things we also do then is to say, basically, update your memory in line with this brain. But anything they then produce through their Claude, whether they're trying to write a LinkedIn post, whether they're trying to understand how to communicate with a colleague where they're having a dispute, that's all grounded in who's doing what at the organization, what our organization actually is, what it's trying to do, where we're at in achieving that, and all the other stuff downstream of there. So yeah, ensuring that if you want to keep this up to date, ensuring you have really solid scheduled tasks for each of those folders. Real time might be once a week, operational might be once a month, and then foundational might only ever be manual, something you might never want to hand over to an AI. A complete how-to guide makes a lot of sense. It's something that we're thinking about putting together, and we can share after this. And we're now going to move into the domain-specific side of things. So we're going to show you Flank. We're going to show you how to really outsource whole categories of work to I've just seen a question come in. We'll address that later. Thanks, Jeff. But whole categories of work to an agent for it to sit and kind of work alongside you. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jake. And I think one final thing I'd add to that is, in maintaining it, Claude is actually great. If you come at it with a problem, if you spot issues, if you point out challenges, it's very good at designing an architecture and a system and a set of scheduled tasks to do this. That's essentially how we did this. We just said to Claude, look, how would we keep this up to date? This is drifting. This is going out of date. And it comes back with its own suggestions. Okay. There was a couple of questions around like consumption-based pricing and things like that being a challenge. I guess we can address that maybe at the end and talk about some of the benefits, because I think, yes, it's getting more expensive, but the benefits of like a hyper-aligned team, for me, massively outweigh the costs. But we'll come on to that. So yeah, Flank. So yeah, we're talking domain specific now. We're talking about agents that are designed and built specifically for legal tasks and are designed to be deployed into existing workflows and existing tech stacks. Where Flank in particular spends a lot of our time automating tasks is with, I'm just going to close the chat for a second, it's really distracting me, is with, so where Flank spends a lot of its time with our customers is helping them automate entire workflows. And a lot of those workflows are where we have a legal team that's often overrun and spending a lot of their time doing sort of high volume repeat requests. A lot of the time, these are coming in from business teams, from commercial teams. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So what we do, and sort of one of our sort of operating principles, is Flank agents are deployed to deliver outcomes and own those outcomes. And we deploy them where those requests are already coming in. So we don't create new tooling for the business to use. We don't create a new platform or a workflow for them to use. There's no real change management in that in that regard. Rather, we deploy where those requests are already happening. And so for the business user, it's kind of like it's business as usual. They don't really notice the difference. Let me just very quickly share something with you to show what I mean. So if I go to my Outlook here, this is just an example I did earlier using one of our demo agents, but I basically asked it to draft me a first issuance of a license agreement. I attached a bunch of deal documents and information here, and I sent that by email, just like I normally would, to the agent. And this can be connected to a shared inbox, right? So you're legal at whatever the company name is. However the business currently requests these things, it could also be Salesforce, CLM, whatever, but however they currently do it. And typically we find email is by far the most common channel. So that's why I'm showing this, but I send an email just as before. I attach all my context just as before. I could just be forwarding a conversation I've had with a client. The agent picks it up, it looks at the request, decides what to do with it. In this case, what it's done is it's replied after a few minutes, because it was quite a complicated request, with a drafted document and a summary of all the information it's put in there, all the stuff it's drafted. And as a business user, this is no different for me than if I just message legal. It's the same thing. Where it does make a difference for is legal. So let me share that now. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. Okay, so this is a view we've built, and what it essentially gives legal is a single view of all of their demand coming in. And if I open the channels here, you can see here we actually have a lot of channels. So we've got a bunch of shared mailboxes that Flank is connected to, Ironclad, Salesforce, Teams. And for a lot of our customers, this is sometimes the first time they get that singular view of everything coming in. So it's a single inbox that shows you everything with all the necessary permissioning and access controls, obviously. But it gives you that single view. Requests come in through whatever channel, they land here. Flank either ignores them if it's within a certain category of work that you've told it to ignore, and then deletes it after 24 hours. If it doesn't ignore it, it picks it up and it routes it either to an agent, a Flank agent, if that's a category of work there's an agent set up for, and if there's a relevant agent to do the work, or if there's not, it will route it to a member of the team, to a human. And as part of configuring Flank, you define your set of rules of what kind of requests go to what people and what information you need to gather and blah, blah, blah. So like a whole triaging process. If I scroll down here, you can see some of these requests have been forwarded to a human here, like this one. And you can see this one here went to the NDA agent, and the NDA agent was actually able to reply. When an agent does pick up work, there will be times when a human is required in the loop. It depends on the work itself. There's some categories of work we see that customers don't need to check. They're happy for an agent to do. Simple stuff like answering questions, drafting documents is usually pretty straightforward unless it's super complex, and even some sort of basic redlining and stuff like that. But where you do want to have a human in the loop, where you want to have a lawyer take responsibility for the agent's output and they need to check it, we create a surface for that here. So let's take this example. We have an NDA review and the agent has drafted a response and given it to me to check. So I can review all the context. I can see all the background. I can check the drafted email response it wants to send. But importantly, there's a red line document here it wants me to check. So I'm going to open that. And I can see if I scroll down that the agent's made some red lines already, but it's surfaced a few things for me to check. And what gets surfaced is controlled by the customer. They decide on what's high risk and what they always want to check, and what is low risk, and they're not really too fussed about unless there's something a bit weird or there's something that the agent isn't confident in. So at the bottom here, you see there's these 10 auto confirm rules, and these are all based off your playbook. All of these rules are essentially codified from your playbooks. Flank ingests them and creates a Flank playbook that creates this rule structure. And you can see all of these have been auto confirmed, and the agent's happy with them, and they've been redlined. And then there's a few things that are high risk that I need to check. So I open them up, I have a quick look, and if I'm happy, I apply. I do that for all of those, and then that's done. So the point of this is, when a lawyer has to take responsibility for an agent's work, we can't have a situation where they have to check absolutely everything, because the time burden of that is so large. So we create this surface so that the lawyer can check only what is absolutely essential, either high risk or the agent isn't sure about. What we find typically is that customers go from early days supervising a lot, and then the burden of supervision drops and they do less and less over time. Let me just finish that. But I think maybe that's a good segue for me to invite Lorna onto the stage and talk about this, because this is something I know Lorna spends a lot of time doing herself, and her team does, and thinking about and talking to customers about. So Lorna, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and explain why you're probably the best placed person to talk about this?
Thanks, Paul. So I lead the legal AI alignment function at Flank. And the reason I'm probably a good person to speak about this topic today is that I spend most of my days working very, very closely with deploying AI agents into large enterprises. So that involves training these agents up until the point that they are operating at the required standard in order to be able to deploy to enterprise for use by end users. And I also rely on my own team of Flank agents to support our commercial engine at Flank. So I've got a super Flank legal agent set up with my playbooks on partnerships agreements, sponsorship agreements, MSAs, NDAs, all this kind of stuff. So working very, very closely with agents, maybe more with agents than with humans at this stage.
I won't comment on that bit, but yeah, no, thanks, Lorna. So you're obviously very confident and comfortable using agents, which is great. When we first start talking to a customer about this, what's almost like the emotional response? What's the response back when you start talking to teams and you say, no, this is not a tool that you're going to use to do a review. The agent is going to do the work. What's the feedback you get?
If I'm going to be honest, it's normally some confusion to start with, and then some skepticism, because most lawyers now are very, very comfortable with using Copilot or Claude Cowork or some sort of assistive technology to leverage an LLM to do their work a little bit faster. The notion of using an agent to get to an outcome, it's a little bit scary because you don't always understand how it got to the ultimate outcome. So there's normally lots of questions that come up, because with any knowledge work, you suddenly realize that with any task, there's so many micro decisions that happen in order for you to be able to deliver a task. And it's trying to understand how could that ever be something that's possible with an agent.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I suppose a lot of other disciplines are going through this or have gone through this. I think one thing I always think about is software engineering, and that being probably the furthest ahead of any kind of knowledge work in terms of automation and the level of automation within that. So there's lots of tools out there. There's some great tools out there. We use a lot of these tools. Things like redlining a document. There's lots of things that can do that.
Yeah.
What's different about Flank then, from your perspective?
When we talk about review, there's so much nuance that's involved, because reviewing a third-party paper, for example, would bring all of its own uncontrollables. Reviewing a first-party paper as well, there are so many different approaches to how a lawyer would review a contract. And with Flank, what I see as a differentiator is the ability to guarantee a standard outcome.
Amazing. Okay, so we guarantee a standard outcome. What happens if, let's say there's, I don't know, an MSA, a counterparty MSA review use case, and Flank just hands over a finished MSA. The agent has done the work. You know it's great. You know it's right. What happens next? What typically happens next?
If I've only received the reviewed contract without seeing anything else, my gut reaction, and I would bet some money that it would be the same gut reaction for other lawyers in the room too, would be to check the whole review end to end, because I don't know the reasoning behind each red line. And as a lawyer, I'm still ultimately accountable for that outcome. So I would want to check to make sure everything is correct.
Yeah, it's interesting. I liken this a little bit to that leadership moment when you start getting your first reports. The people report to you, your first team around you, and there's always that friction where it's hard to like almost let go a little bit. You always feel the need to check absolutely everything. A junior might have done something in a slightly different way. It might not be wrong, but it might be done in a slightly different way than you have. And you have to go through a process, right, where you learn to step back and be like, I just need to let that go. I need to let them do their thing. And there feels like there's a bit of a parallel here. So I guess one question for me is, and I know you've used this, so you've used this, I showed that supervision side panel just a moment ago. How has that changed taking responsibility for the agent's output for you? Because I think that was always the aim, right? That the agent does the work, but a lawyer still needs to take responsibility for the output. You can't just blindly send something off. But like you said, if you just receive the document, you're going to read the whole thing and you're going to check the whole thing. You're probably going to end up fiddling with it now. And so you might as well have just done it yourself. So how has that supervision panel helped you in your team?
The side panel has been such a game changer, because I don't have so many unanswered questions in my mind anymore. I know exactly why the agent has reached a particular decision on every single item. I know that is going to surface escalated points for my attention consistently, reliably. And the side panel just helps me have all the information that I need when I'm supervising a particular review. And what I've noticed happen over time, I'm having to check less and less because my trust in that agent is building, and I'm so much more confident that the agent is effectively acting as an extension of me, because it's working to my standards. And I think that's where we need to make a distinction between preference and standard.
Yeah.
And we need to just keep that objective standard in mind, because like I said, like we said earlier, five lawyers might review the same contract very differently, but they might all actually be right. So as long as we maintain an objective standard, that's what matters most. And the side panel helps build that trust in knowing that the agent is making the right calls consistently.
And we kind of touched on this before, but how do you codify that standard? Like, what does that standard look like?
So what you mean in terms of codifying rules, or what the outcome needs to look like?
Yeah, so both actually, but yeah, primarily, how do we define what that bar is?
So it's so important to keep that objectivity to start with, because my big learning from working with lots of enterprises is that even that clean slate of a tidy set of documented rules is actually quite difficult to achieve when you have so many preferences to accommodate for. So the starting point needs to be stripping back and aligning on what those rules need to be, and being willing to invest the time and effort in dialing in an agent to meet your standards. And it's the exact same process as if we were to work closely with a new hire or somebody who's moved teams. There's that element of providing it the right context that it needs and the right guidance and support up until the point that it's operating to the standard that you want. And a good indication of that becomes how involved supervision is. If the process is going well, supervision involvement, so changes required through supervision, should decline, and it should only be reserved for these high risk or very occasional complex points that need to be escalated.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Lorna. I've also invited Lily on stage, as everyone will notice. So yeah, Lily's another one of our co-founders. So welcome, Lily. Lily, I just want to ask, we are short of time, but I really wanted to bring your perspective in here. You spend, I mean, your diary is absurd. You spend all day speaking to customers and prospects. I wanted to get your perspective on trust and the feedback you hear from customers around the ability to take responsibility for an agent's work and that process, because it's a bit of a journey, right?
Yeah, I would agree. It's a journey, but I think it's a journey that especially complex global enterprise legal teams are used to going on, because everybody who's worked, especially in leadership or in legal operations there, has gone through a process of either hiring new team members to do the work or outsourcing that work to a service center or an LSP or even a law firm. And there's also a journey there on the trust, right? Because you're looking at, okay, how competent is that person? But that's not really the critical point always. It's also how much context does this person have about the organization that they can make the right choices within their competency. So there's a learning process every single time that activity shifts from being done one way to a new person or to a new model in an enterprise team. And so I think we're used to this. We're just not used to this quite yet with technology. And this is why we need those heavy guardrails and these heavy checks and balances that we've kept talking about around supervision. But that process of trust building is something that I believe already exists. And when we look at this with our customers, we see that being replicated. Over the first few months, everything is supervised, of course. Yeah. And then as you learn to trust your new resource, that in this case happens to be infinitely scalable, you learn to let go on certain tasks or not, depending on the industry that you're in, right? I also fully acknowledge that in certain industries or with certain certain tasks that agents do, you'll never want it to be fully autonomous. And that's perfectly fine. But you still don't want maybe your humans, your people doing the actual work. You just want them to be the arbiters of taste and the arbiters of what good looks like in the organization.
Yeah, totally. And I think in the deck, actually, we have which we're going to share afterwards. So we have a graph for this that kind of shows the effort level. And initially, and we've seen this with customers, and I think when our customers really buy into agentic outcomes, they realize this is different to a tool like Cowork you can use on day one, and immediately it's helpful and it's doing stuff for you. But that's different to buying an outcome. An outcome, there's a level of upfront investment. And I've even said to customers, look, it's not going to feel like life's easy on day one or day two or day three. It's still, you're going to be checking stuff, we're dialing things in, but this is an investment that's going to actually quicker than most people think start paying off, and over weeks, you know, you get down to 50% supervision. And I think we have a lot of customers who it's, you know, they're in you know, maybe a third of things they're checking, those real high risk things. Yeah, I think we're basically out of time. I don't know if Jake wants to come up and quickly round off. I know he's been busy answering questions in the chat, but thank you so much, everyone. It's been great, and it's been a super lively chat from what I can see. I'm looking forward to going through it at the end.
I think my fingers are falling off. They were great questions. What we wanted to do here is really give a very high level, quick introduction to the different ways you might use agentic AI for yourselves. So much more the build angle rather than the buying in kind of assistive technology angle. If you are in the middle of a build project at the moment, or you're kicking one off, or it's on your roadmap, and you're a larger enterprise, then do reach out. There's various ways we can support you with that. There are workshops that we run. Our forward deployed team and our legal engineering team run workshops. They come in, they sit with you, and there's a whole range of different topics. I believe Aglaya will drop it into the chat here, a link so you can see an overview of the workshops. And yeah, if you're further along in your journey and you're already beginning to look at domain specific legal models, of course, please get in touch, and we can show you Flank hands-on. And finally, we'll be sharing much more in-depth information about each of the verticals that Paul touched upon in a follow-up email, and it will be on Insights. So all of the links you see come through this insights.flank.ai link, and this is our portal where we share, not impartial, obviously we're super biased, we have a particular perspective, but we share stuff that is less about Flank and more about the market, our vision, legal AI, AI in general, where it's going, trainings, workshops, all this kind of stuff. So we try and just be as valuable as possible in that sense. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone who engaged, who asked questions. If you've got any more questions that we weren't able to cover today, hit us up on LinkedIn, shoot us a message, let us know if you want a workshop. And hopefully you will see some of you in the next webinar that we host, probably in September, I believe, because August tends to be pretty quiet. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a great rest of your afternoon, wherever you are.